Hello, this is the Technacy innovation chart that's being constructed. What I want to show you here is a chart that's designed to accommodate teachers who are trying to look at appropriate developmental expectations in how kids understand technology at different stages of their development. The chart has two axes, and we found that this was important because across the top you'll find that there is an axis to do with technological understanding, and this ranges from the emergent level through to competent and ultimately up to sophisticated. And each one of these areas have an early and upper dimension to them. So a child might go from early emergent to upper emergent, early competent to upper competent, early sophisticated to upper sophisticated. Now, across the rows we have developmental domains of innovation, and this is to help identify that difference between learners who are exploring and playing with no particular purpose and then becoming quite consolidated in the range of skills that they're learning until they finally get to that fairly matured position where they are starting to explore and pioneer new ideas. So when you put the two axes together, you've got a very interesting way in which you can facilitate more accurate learning and observation as a teacher. And let's have a look at how this works. When the chart's finished, you'll see it progress in a certain way. Initially, you'll notice that there is a genre menu that can be pulled down. The content of the chart changes its criteria and indicators depending on which genre you're in. So let's have a look at what might a built environment technology genre look like. In the built environment genre, you'll see that there's a number of indicators coming across. Everyone, we feel, when they first encounter a technology new to them, will begin with some emergent play, and this is essentially a very useful stage in the start of learning. If you're introducing a new technology or a new tool or a new technique, it's very important to allow the adult or even the child to just play and understand the properties of the materials or the properties of the tools that you're using. Of course, done in a safe way. The idea here is to allow the brain to start forming concepts of what this tool or material is about. Often at this stage there's non-directed play or play that's starting to form ideas in a modelled way. Cliches and mimicry start to appear. From here, the learning can progress with greater expectations, either towards the competent phase, which starts to identify ways in which playful activity can be used in a competent way. This is usually like modelling rather than actual implementation, creating models and marquees, or might start to consolidate techniques and start to construct elements together. Both are important, and that's why you can see that the purple arrows invite the project to try and cover both areas. Sometimes, however, you'll find that the learner goes to quite extremes. In the emergent pioneer domain, you'll find that at that top green arrow, this is where you see people who have fantastic ideas. They're explorers. They've had a little bit of consolidation after some play, but their ideas are just highly unlikely and improbable. And so what we think is important here is that these are actually people who have created wonderful ideas but just don't have the competence to implement them, and they may have to work with others who do, or undertake some competency development themselves. Again, along the bottom, when people have developed some competent play modelling, they start to get quite sophisticated in how they play with their ideas. And that sophisticated right-hand column is quite important because this is where you have people who are extremely good at modelling an idea. They are usually able to visually represent the idea in ways that are so plausible that a well-skilled, competent developer could look at those plausible ideas and say, you know, that could actually work. So the sophisticated play person is someone who's very good at schema, is very good at visual representation and motion and movement, but hasn't themselves actually implemented the project, but they're very good at designing what is a plausible, implementable idea. Whereas the emergent pioneer has great ideas, but they're not plausibly able to be implemented, and they need to work through some detail a bit more. At some stage, either through cultural peer support or through a series of skilled certified training, either at school or other institutions. Both avenues are really important. Sometimes you have people who are very good at what they're doing, but they haven't gone through an institution. So we label this important phase as a competent consolidation, where they have peer cultural endorsement of their capability, even if not certificated. This is often the case in cross-cultural and other cultural domains, where people have enormous capability far beyond the institution's capability to teach. It's just that they don't have a ticket. On the other hand, our formal social institutions do provide a way in which these skills can be recognised, and so that's another way you often recognise when they're in this competence consolidation domain. Above that, you'll see that there's the competent pioneer. Now, the competent pioneer is somebody who's exploring new ideas based on competence they've already gained. They're able to take risks, but the project isn't entirely complex at this stage. To the right, you'll find that there's the sophisticated consolidation. Sophisticated consolidation is that person who has already developed certain competencies through institution or cultural peer support, but they're now venturing into a space of projects which are very complex. So complex that you usually start to require those skills needed to work in a team and collaborate with others, and there are many unknowns starting to come into the picture. However, you're still working with a consolidated set of skills to address a complex situation. Finally, and this is a very difficult phase domain in the Technacy chart to sustain. It's difficult to sustain because the project itself is difficult to sustain at this level. This is the level where there is very high risk and yet high return if you can get it right. So you'll find in the sophisticated pioneer projects, this is a project where you have multiple people involved. They have to learn how to work socially together. They have to actually make things work, not simulate. And they really need to be on their game in many unknowns towards progressing a project. So overall, you'll see a project here where I think for the most part about year 5 or below would start at the emergent play phase, and high school would probably cover all those areas going diagonally from the emergent pioneer through to emergent consolidation and competent consolidation, with some certification and endorsements, and including the possibility of quite sophisticated play and modelling and scenarioing in the bottom right. However, it's rare for school students to get into the competent pioneer and sophisticated consolidation and sophisticated pioneer stage, because these things really require the project to be in real time, real commerce, real market contexts. And so this is where you start to see people who already have achieved professional credentials starting to work in quite high accountability projects. So more or less, people start with their first encounter with a technology project that you introduce to them, and you make sure they provide some opportunity to play and experience the materials and tools, techniques, and early ideas around the purpose and goals of the project. And they move up to the top right, progressing in increasing degrees of complexity and sophistication in how they understand the relationship between people, technology, and the environment as a system. Context becomes particularly important as you progress to the top right. So that's the higher level synthesis skill, synthesizing context criteria to define what materials and tools, techniques, systems you need to bring in to make a project idea work. Okay, now in the next video we will have a brief explanation for what the walls and roundabouts are for in the way you use the chart.